I'm Andy Tompkins, and I work on the Pearson team. Some of you may speak with me if calling into the Service Center for help this year. Our for today, as we mentioned, we're going to be looking at some of what's new for the 2016 administration. We're going to talk a bit about available accommodations. We'll be looking at what some of the differences are between the DC Science and PARCC administrations. We'll be looking at PearsonAccess next and how we'll use that system to assist administering the test. We'll look at register students. We'll talk about paper testing, which is something new that's available for DC Science this year. Look at how to manage your test sessions. We'll look at TestNav itself a little bit, just briefly. We'll talk about some important dates, keep in mind, and then we will show you where you can go to get support. Started, I did mute all lines upon entry. However, if you do have a question, as we have said, please hesitate to let us know as we go throughout the training. You'll simply just need to use #6 on your phone to unmute your line. We just ask that when you're done with your question, if you could just hit *6 to remute your line. That would be helpful, as it'll help to eliminate background noise. All right, so new for 2016. There are some new accommodations and accessibility features that will be available to you. The first is an audio test. An audio test will allow the student to log into TestNav, the online testing system, and the test being read to them via a pre-recorded voice file. Test and answer masking will also be available from within the online platform. We're going to talk as we go throughout the training about these new additions and we would go about making sure that your students receive them. In the test itself, there are a couple of changes. Last year for 2015, the DC Science test, which is a one-part test. For 2016, it will be a two-part test, which means for the online test, there will be what's called a seal code in the middle. So a 4-digit code that will need to be provided to the student in order for them to move from one part of the test to the next. And we talk about that also later in the training. As I alluded to earlier, we are also offering a paper test as an accommodation. Remember here is that although the student tests using the paper test book, that test will need to be transcribed into the online testing environment, and we'll talk about how you get that set up and how to make that happen later as well. Having said that, we're going to jump into accommodations and accessibility. Lisha is going to walk us through this portion of the presentation.
Good, everyone. Move to the next slide. This slide provides an overview of what we're going to cover in this section of the presentation. So for review accommodations and accessibility features for students with disabilities, English language learners, compare the PARCC accommodations and accessibility features to DC Science accommodations and accessibility features. And later in the presentation, Suya and we'll go over the differences that may impact test administration planning and scheduling. And we're going to also provide an overview of the personal needs profile for DC Science. I want to call your attention to 3 buckets that inform the DC Science assessment accessibility system, and these, what I'm calling buckets, are represented in these circles here. The first one in purple relates to accessibility features available to all students. So these are features that all students can access at any time and there's no documentation required. In the second circle in blue, these are additional features that are available to any student and must be identified on the student's PNP, and we refer to those as administrative considerations. In the third circle here in gray or green are certain accommodations that are available only to students with disabilities with IEP or 504 plans. So those accommodations would need to be definitely documented, and they're only available to students where we are specifying in the Testing Accommodations Manuals Parts 1 and 2. And these accommodations definitely must be documented in the student's IP or 504 plan or ELL plan, and also noted in the student's PNP where applicable. Move to the next slide, going to some examples of each type of feature. So accessibility features available to all students on DC Science include highlighter tools, answer eliminator, line reader tools, answer masking, and color contrast. In the next available accessibility features, we have administrative considerations, which some examples are frequent breaks, small group testing, or preferential seating. For students who have an IEP or a 504 plan, or student with disability, we have the option for audio form, human scribe, paper-based test, extended time, and lastly, for ELs, accommodations such as word-to-word dictionary, extended time, or human scribe. So just to provide an overview, there are some PARCC accommodations that are available for use on the DC Science assessment. So for a student who needs one or more of these accommodations, it's important that there is an equivalent accommodation provided, and where there are confusions about that, the crosswalk should be used, and so should parts 1 and 2, part 1 of our testing accommodations manual. And in these cases, the IEP does not need to be amended for the student if its needs have not changed since the PARCC testing. Moving to the next slide, we have an example, a shot here of the crosswalk, and this is what you would use that I mentioned in the previous slide to look for equivalent accommodation across all of the available assessments. And the Testing Accommodations Manual Part 1 is also a great resource. Moving on to the next slide, where a student's accommodation is not listed in SEDS and is not listed on crosswalk or in Part 1 or Part 2 of the Testing Accommodations Manual, what you'd want to do is to make sure that the IEP team accommodation as a unique accommodation. So additionally, in marking unique accommodations in SEDS, the LEA must submit a unique accommodation request to OSSE for approval. One of the things that's new this year is that we're accepting unique accommodation requests through the OSSE support tool. And the OST training is available at the hyperlink there. And I'm going to provide a screenshot in the next slide. How you would go on to the Space app to access the OSSE support tool. And a username and password is required to access the OSSE support tool. So what you need to do is, if you do not have a username and password, you would need to email the OSSE.assessment@dc.gov email. Example of what the PNP, a snapshot of the PNP for DC Science. It looks very similar to PARCC, and I just want to point out the fact that the PNP does not capture all accommodations that the student may receive. However, if a student has documented accommodations in their IEP or 504 plan, then accommodations must be assigned to them, to the student. Moving on to the next slide, I'm talking about accommodations for English language learners. So for English language learner accommodations, the details are outlined in Part 2 of our Testing Accommodations Manual. Can be accessed by clicking the hyperlink in this PowerPoint on the OSSE website. For ELL students who need assistance understanding the directions, the administrator is permitted to three primary things: the instructions out loud in English, repeat the instructions in English, and clarify the instructions in the student's native language. Some of the accommodations that were available in PARCC are still available for science, while some are not. So the DC Science assessment is not available in other languages at this time. Therefore, translation beyond general administration directions is permitted. Once again, please use the ELL crosswalk to determine appropriate similar accommodations in Part 2 of the Testing Accommodations Manual. This is a screenshot of the ELL Science Accommodation PNP. You would want to note the section that has to do with accommodations for English learners, and those would need to be specified for the student. Moving to the next slide, I'm handed over to Swia to discuss testing considerations for test administration, planning, and scheduling.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about things that you need to do to prepare to administer DC Science. I've had a lot of training up to this point around test integrity and how to set up students, different around PearsonAccess Next and TestNav, but we really want to focus in on if you're thinking about science, what do you need to consider to do as you are preparing to administer. The first thing is to verify your student registration. As we did last year, students we uploaded into PearsonAccess Next for the 7th and 8th grade students, and you would need to verify those student registrations. What I will be covering will be elaborated on further as we go through the presentation, but I just want to make sure that we highlight some things that you really need to consider as you're preparing. After registration is in the system, make sure that you review the student's PNP information and make sure that that information is correct. And the students need accommodations. We have several sources so that you can see what alternative accommodations are if they don't line up with the PARCC load that we bring over. You can look at the crosswalk, or you can actually look at the testing accommodation manuals that are available on the OSSE website. School biology PNP information will have to be entered at the school level. Is not able to bring that information over. The thing you want to consider is students may need to access the test through paper-based testing, and you would want to order paper forms. We have an online system to order the forms, and we have 2 test windows, and 2 delivery windows for the paper test. And we're going to go into that for detail in the presentation. But keep in mind, will students need to access the test through a page form? These are only for students with accommodations. These are not for the general population. You want to determine what your test schedule will be. We are offering the flexibility because there are 2 parts to the test, that the test can be given within the same day, or the test can be given over 2 separate days. Again, the time tests are 60 minutes apiece for each grade, so each part of the test will take 60 minutes to complete 15 questions. And you need to think about that as you're planning. Will you be doing it within the same day, or will you be doing it on separate days? Many of you have already submitted your plans, your school plans. If you have not confirmed your schedule for science at this point, you are allowed to submit an addendum, and it needs to be OSSE within the OSSE tool 15 days prior to the start of testing. And this thing is really considering the different types of groups that you're going to need to set up. Last year, we only had the read aloud in the main session. This year, we're also having a transcription session and an audio session. So As you are preparing your test groups, you need to think about which students need accommodations and how you'll be setting up your testing groups within PearsonAccess Next. To consider are maintaining security of the test materials. Here we're talking about tickets, seal codes, science, and the test booklet. They will need to be maintained even if you decide to test a student within the same day when they're not taking the test. They will have to be collected and maintained in secure settings while the students are computer testing. You need to have separate test environments. Between the computer-based testing and paper-based testing, you would not want to test those students in the same environment, so you need to make sure that you have the space to be able to do the different types of testing. The audio form, last year we have audio form. This is new. It can be an alternative to human reader if you choose to go that route, where the students themselves have the ability to listen to tests being read to them. And you will need headphones for this particular accommodation. We did not require headphones last year, only as noise producers, but this year if a student is taking an audio version of the test, they will need to have headphones. We've got the paper forms, and human scribe and human signer are also still options if students need those accommodations. And any external devices, some require external devices. Please. Considerations are how you will prepare for small group or individual testing. Have minimal text. We have scripts this year for the science, but it's not to the extent that we have for PARCC. So you want to make sure that there is some preliminary review and training for individuals that will be doing small group or individual administration of the test, as well as how the scribing and transcription process will work. You are able to maintain your material up to the test window, but we are requesting that you get the transcription done within 48 hours of the student testing. So those types of things those types of considerations need to be made as you're planning for the test for administration. Next slide, please. We'll go into the PNP too much at this time. You have been trained on how to review the PNP and set up the personal needs profiles for your students. But we just want to make sure that you know, although it won't trigger things within the system, it is important documentation of what's occurring within the student's testing conditions. And we're asking that you read that and make any updates to types of accommodations that students will be receiving. So to repeat, it will not turn on or off any accessibility features of accommodations. It is data that we're requiring that you include as you are preparing to test your students. That is documentation that we will need. As you're aware, most of you are aware that you will be seeing those changes in the manage test location. Next slide, please. That's a snapshot of what it looks like for science accommodations in the PNP, and we will go that in further detail. There are two ways that you can complete a PNP. You can actually choose what method works best for you. You can do a file layout import, and we're just going to briefly touch on how that can occur, or the user interface. The LEA school or staff will fill out the PNP for individual students within PearsonAccess Next. further instructions or training, we've included a link within the PARCC site. Hopefully you're familiar with that on actually creating and editing PNP. So we want to spend a great deal of time walking you through that process, but just making you aware that it is a step in the process that you need to prepare for. This time, I'm going to pass it over to Andy.
All right, Svea. Okay, talk a little bit about what some of the differences between DC Science and PARCC are, and some of these have already been mentioned, but as we go throughout the training, you're going to hear some of these things repeated, primarily just so that we can help you to grab a hold of what those differences are. So there are going to be some similarities. There will be some important differences. So I'm going to be talking about what science does not have that PARCC does. So science, as previously mentioned, will not assign forms or accessibility features based on what is entered for the student's PNP. Again, anything entered into PearsonAccess Next related to the student's PNP is for documentation purposes, not the auto-assigned. Science will not offer the text-to-speech option, nor have an American Sign Language form. DCs will also not use unit testing, and for those of you that have been testing PARCC this year, you'll know that it changes the way in which a test is presented to students. And we'll talk about that and what that exactly means a little bit later in the training. That I wanted to note that is different is that DC Science does not require the return of any paper test books that are used for accommodated testing. We're clear about what we'll want you to do with those. What science will do that's different than PARCC is that we will use an audio form. Audio form is a pre-recorded voice that will read the student to the test while the student uses headphones. It will require a transcription of any paper tests that are taken, and those responses will then need to be transcribed into TestNav, the testing system. To talk a little bit about PearsonAccess Next, I believe that many of you have a significant experience in this system, and so this is just going to be a quick overview for those of you that have that experience. Those of you that don't, know that there is a PearsonAccess Next user's guide that will guide you through step-by-step anything that needs to be done in the system. Don't feel overwhelmed if I'm moving through this too quickly. There are resources to help you get the information that you need. Logging into the system, get to the DC Science Administration, and then take a quick look at the home screen for DC Science. So here we're going to log in, and what I want to point out here is that when you get to this screen, you're going to see some customer support information. Take note that this information here is for the PARCC administration. To get you the contact us information for DC Science, you actually need to sign in, and when you get to the DC Science home screen, that's where you're going to see the appropriate contact administration information for this specific administration. When your default is going to be to the last thing that you looked at. What you'll want to do is make sure that you select DC Science Spring 2016, and in the right-hand corner, you'll see the name of your school or testing district. Whatever you have permissions to view will be in that upper right-hand corner. The thing that I referenced earlier, the red circle here on the screen is where you will find that DC support. And it says that you use that information. If you were to call the first number, you may not be able to get the help that you need. So calling number will take you to customer service agents that have information that is specific to the DC Science assessment. We move into student registration. Does anyone have any questions about how to access the system? And under, you can use #6 to unmute your phone.
Questions at this time?
Okay, great. We'll move and talk a little bit about student registration. As I mentioned earlier, Pearson will be importing registration for grades 5. however, will need to be imported by the schools. And a little bit more specifics about that on the next slide. We're going to look at the PNP. We're going to talk about file imports and then also manual entry to register students in the system. As was the case in 2015, the majority of DC Science students will have already been loaded into PearsonAccess Next for you. Then we'll be loading grades 5 and 8 registrations, and we'll be doing that based on the enrollment from PARCC Spring 2016. So we're going to take the enrollment from Math 2016 PARCC, and we're going to use that information and we're going to re-import it for you for DC Science. Biology, however, Pearson will not be doing that registration. So school will be responsible for uploading their own registration and PNP information for biology students. The run window will open on April 18th, and Pearson will be doing their grade 5 and 8 loading on that day as well. However, please give us until about April 20th before you go in to start validating the P information that has been placed into the system. We would ask that you go in and validate that information. As I said, Pearson will be taking the grade 5 and 8 math enrollments and PNP information, and we'll be loading those into the system. But it will be up to you and the schools to go in and look at that PNP information and make sure that everything is still valid and that nothing has changed. What I also want to mention here is that there will be a change from how this was done in 2015 to how we'll be doing it in 2016. In 2015, Pearson loaded grade 5 and 8 and also then loaded students into a test session by school. And we named that test session either grade 5 or grade 8, depending on the grade that we were loading for. The decision here was made to not do that, and that decision was made because there will be several session types available here based on the population of students that you're testing. And rather than placing all of those students into one large test session and then asking you all to split them out, we thought it'd be better just to not load to a test session at all, have you create each one of those individual session types and then just bring those students into the sessions. So that's the direction that we'll be taking this year. And we will talk later about how to set up those individual sessions. Step-by-step instructions on how to create and or update a personal needs profile, a PNP. Our resources available to help you with that, and the link here on this slide will take you to that module. And then the steps are really the same, whether you're doing it for PARCC or DC Science. Just know that there will be some differences in the information that is being collected, and again, what it will actually do for the student, depending on the administration. It shows kind of the steps on how to do a registration file import. Now, I'll walk through all the details of that. However, know that, as I noted before, instructions step by step on how to do that. And as always, if you have any questions, Pearson customer support is here. But what you need really is as simple as going into PearsonAccess Next, select Import, Export Data Task, select what the type is, and in this case it would be registration import, what your file type, and then select your file and process. The one I would mention here that will be loading these files, if do so in a CSV format, there are a couple of things that you'll want to be mindful of. Most importantly with the CSV file is once you've created that file and save it down, reopening that file will with the formatting a little bit. So what we see most often is that when you reopen a CSV file, you lose all of your preceding zeros. When you do that, it changes your data. And so that could make loading this import problematic, as you're going to receive errors as the data not necessarily going to be recognized. So it's whenever working with CSV, if edit is needed to the file, it's best to go back to the original source, which is usually an Excel file. Make it there, resave as a CSV, and then re-upload. Avoid reopening that CSV file if at all possible. import is one of the ways to get your student registrations into PearsonAccess next. I think for those of you uploading biology students, that may be the direction that you choose to go, as you'll be dealing with a larger number of students all at once. That may just be adding some students to what's already in PearsonAccess next for those grades 5 and 8 kids. It may make more sense for you to do that work manually within the system. And these next few slides are going to cover. For a student manually through PearsonAccess next, there are multiple steps that you need to take. So go to Setup, and then in your tasks, you're going to indicate that you want to create edit students, and then just click Registration as well, as we'll kind of take all of these steps just one by one, and they can be done sequentially without having to go back and forth. You'll hear across the top of the screen in the gray-black bar. The first thing here is to create edit students, and see enroll students, and then register, and then manage student tests, and so on and so forth. And this is an tabbed interface, so we can just go from one task to the other, be sure that we've hit each element of what needs to be done to register a student manually. The first is to create a student. Simply enter the details being asked for, so organization, last name, first name, date of birth. Anything required does have a red asterisk. Once you're that required information, you click Create. Now in the system. However, we still haven't registered or assigned a student a test, so that's what we need to move forward with. The second tab that you see is Enroll Students. Of the Create Edit process, you've already told the system what school that student is in. This screen really is just a way for you to verify that. So that information from tab 1 is just going to carry over onto tab 2. To provide that information, you then go to the registration, which is the third tab. There's a box at the top of that page that will not be checked when you first go to it. Check that box will open up all other fields on this screen. So you would check the box and then complete the information. Again, red asterisks mean that it's a required field. One thing you want to point out is that from the 2015 DC assessment to the 2016 DC assessment, you may see some slight variances in the data that's being collected or the layout in which it's being collected. And I'll do my best to point out to you what some of those differences are as we go through the training. Specific on this screen that is a little bit different, and you would have seen this for PARCC 2016 as well, is that the responsible school code is now a one-position field, where it used to be two separate fields, one for district and one for school. So that's changed. We've combined that into one. The difference that you'll see is that we've added the element of SHIP report, district code, and school. This is also added for PARCC. In addition, from a DC Science perspective, take that information in and we will just pass it on. Besides that, there's really not much that's different on screen from what you have seen historically. Here's a map of that registration screen. You continue to fill in that information. You'll see the English learner information that was referenced earlier is here. And once you filled out any applicable information, you would simply click Save. Now at this point, your student is registered, but they're not yet ready to take a test. Before a student can take a test, the student test details must be complete. This part of the Student Test tab, the next two slides will show all of the data that is collected here. This is the information in the system that relates to the PNP. This is that critical information that Lanisha and Swea spoke to that needs to be collected for documentation and data purposes. However, remember that this will not translate to what happens to the student's form or accessibility features when we get to online testing. One of the things that I wanted to point out on this slide specifically is the addition of color contrast and answer masking. And see that at the bottom of the screen. In both cases, these are check boxes. So we're saying, yes, the student has the accommodation for color contrast, or if they don't, you just leave it blank. Same for answer masking. Well, specifically about these, in addition to the fact that they are not driving forms, is that these will look a little bit different than the way that you make this indication in the PARCC administration. For example, contrast in the PARCC administration is a drop-down section where you're actually choosing the color contrast combination that the student needs to receive when they log into the form. DC Science, you're simply saying, take it, or I'm sorry, are they going to use it or aren't they? Are they eligible for it or aren't they? Both of these accessibility features is that regardless of what you indicate here, check or not, every student that logs into the online form for DC Science will have access to both of these features. These features are going to be available to every student. It'll to the student as to whether or not they turn these features on or off. The indication that is made here in the student test will have no bearing whatsoever on what happens when the student logs into the form. Here's half of the student testing tab. You'll see here that there is some additional PNP information that is being asked for. What I want to point out here was another difference from 2015 to 16. That is the addition of the audio accommodation. We did this a little bit earlier in the training. This will be new for the 2016 administration. And this is just a checkbox. Did the student, or does the student rather, qualify for the audio accommodation or not? If they do, check the box. Again, it will not drive the audio form assignment in the test session. We're working very soon at how to set up those accommodations for students in those test sessions. Does anyone have any questions on getting a student into the system, registering them, setting up the student test? I know there's a lot of information in a very short amount of time, so I just want to make sure that there aren't any outstanding questions before we move on.
Nothing.
Okay. All right, so we'll move into paper testing, which is something that is new for 2016. We're going to talk about the directions, how to submit an order, what it means to transcribe those responses into TestNav, and then we'll talk a little bit about textbook security, both before and after testing. So as mentioned earlier, this is a two-part test, and that is true for both paper and online. I mentioned for the online test that meant that there would be a seal code or a 4-digit code that a student needed to input into the system before they could go from one part to another. For paper, that's not true. The sections are not sealed, so it will be up to the administrator to ensure that students Part 1 when they're supposed to be in Part 1 and in Part 2 when they're supposed to be in Part 2. I think the script that we referenced earlier in the training will be a helpful tool for administrators in ensuring that happens. There will be a stop sign in the test book in between the two parts as a visual aid to let students and administrators know where the sections break. Or each part will be 60 minutes in length. That's what time we allotted for each student. And parts can be tested across 2 days or one, whichever scheduling-wise works out better for you, and can be tested out of order. 2 can be taken before Part 1. And the paper script will be available to assist administrators in sharing this test with students. And I'm sure OSSE, SWIA will share that, locate that script when it's available. So as mentioned, you will have the ability to submit an order for paper tests. The link here to the order request form is at the bottom of the screen. You'll see on the right-hand side here what that form is going to look like. So there'll be 2 ways of materials. The first, for orders submitted by April 8th, Pearson will have those paper test books delivered April 20th through April 22nd. Anything submitted by April 25th will be delivered to schools May 11th through May 13th. So we've made times now that all paper tests will need to be transcribed online. We're going to have you return those paper test books to Pearson or their vendor for scoring. So in order for that test to be scored, it will have to be transcribed into TestNav. The administrator that works directly with the student should log into TestNav and transcribe those responses. And to make it happen, it's as easy as setting up a test session will allow for that paper form to be available in the system, and I'll show you how to do that. And will need to be completed prior to the end of the testing window. And I believe, Suya, you mentioned a 48-hour recommendation as far as a time frame earlier in the training.
Correct.
Great. Okay. So books are secure, and they really should be kept secure both before and after testing. If students take a break in between Part 1 and Part 2, tests should be collected and kept secure. If you're testing over the course of a couple of days, same thing. Those tests should be locked up and kept secure. Once students have completed testing, the test should be securely shredded. But be sure that those student responses have been transcribed into the TestNav testing platform. Any questions on paper test administration? Okay. Forward. So next we're going to talk about test session management, creating test sessions. And as we've alluded to throughout the training, there are several types of sessions that you may need to create. So there'll be test sessions, read aloud test sessions, audio, and transcribe. We'll talk how to make each one of those test sessions available for your students. We'll talk about some tasks that will help you to manage those test sessions once they've been created. Maybe to move students from one session to another. You'll want to monitor their testing status as they're in and testing. You may resume a test. We'll talk about what seal codes are and how to use them. There's functionality called Set Section Start to allow for an online tester to take Part 2 before Part 1, and we'll talk about that. And we'll also look at how to mark a student test complete and or void. Now, as a reminder, we talked earlier about how in 2015, Pearson auto-created test sessions for all grade 5 and 8 students. That will not be done for 2016. So as I go through these slides, know that for each student, each group of students, a test session will need to be created in order for these students to test online. The process that I'm going to walk you through. However, I think you'll see it's actually a fairly simple process, and there's not a lot of steps involved. To access next, you would simply select Create Edit Session, which takes you to the test session details screen. So access here, and I just want to talk briefly about each one of these. So naming your session, and you can name that whatever you would like for identification purposes. You'll have an organization, and what you have to select from there will directly relate to the permissions that you have in PearsonAccess next. So if you only have permissions to see one organization, that's all that you'll see in that drop-down. You're going to use the test assigned based on what it is that you're testing. Grade 5 students, grade 8 students, or biology. And then you get a scheduled start date. The scheduled start date, although a required field, is not going to automatically start the test session in any way. Simply for documentation purposes, and OSSE may monitor that for schedules to see who is testing and when. An important element of setting up this test session is the form group type. You'll see that the third box down on the left. When we go to the next slide, you'll see what your options are here, but that is the piece that's going to tell us what form it is the student needs to receive. Are to be testing audio? It's going to be a group of paper students that need to have their form transcribed, or it's a group of main testing students. Now, don't have a box around is the little check mark right above that where it says Proctor reads aloud. And we will talk about this as well, because that's where you will make a designation that you are going to do a read aloud session. And I think some of you will remember that this is what we did last year for DC Science, and this is also how it works in PARCC for read aloud. You chat box, and then you would choose read aloud as your option. out on this slide is at the bottom here where it says students. Once you get all of your test session details in there, what you do is you can simply just click in the student box, and you're automatically going to get a list of students. And the students that you see there are going to be directly related to the selections that you made in the test session details, specifically the organization and assigned. So, for example, in this screen, any student that is at Andy's test school that is assigned a biology test is going to be available for me in that list. I would just start to select those students, and they will be added to the session. So there are only requirements to get a student into a test session. They have to be at organization and to be assigned an online test in that category or grade. So biology, grade 5, grade 8. This is a closer-up picture of what you're going to see in that form group type selection. So as mentioned before, the top screenshot has the Proctor Reads Aloud checkbox selected. That's for the Read Aloud option to be selected as the form group type. It will be the only option that you have. Doing that will ensure that every student in the test session gets the Read Aloud form and that the prior testing ticket is also generated. And later where to get that Proctor testing ticket. But what that does is it allows the proctor to have login and password into TestNav so that they too can look at the online items and read them to the student. If it's not a read aloud session, the options are audio, main, and transcribe. Your option, again, is going to be pre-recorded items for each test item, and the student wear headphones to hear the item being read to them. Main is simply the main population, the general population, no accommodation. And types to be selected for any students who are receiving the paper accommodation. Responses later are going to be transcribed into TestNav. Setting test session up as a transcribed test session will ensure that the on-form delivered in that test session matches the paper test book that you'll be transcribing the responses from. So it really is critical that when you are creating your test sessions and putting into test sessions, that you've identified which one of these groups those students belongs in, that the student belongs into. Any questions on that? Yeah.
We did a question from Dominique for OSSE, and I just didn't know if and Lanisha had seen it yet. She's asking if there's a session naming convention for DC Science like there is for PARCC.
Okay. Question. Svea or Lanisha?
There is no session naming convention.
All right, great, thanks. Any questions? Don't shy. We have plenty of time. I know this is something that all of you will be doing in some capacity. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Oh, hold on. So here we are, once we have a session created and we want to go through, we can, let me back up a minute. We've gotten all of our sessions created. What I want to do is show you how can I see as a user everything that I need. How do I know that everything's there? So I go to testing, which is in the corner, and then I go down to this search box and click show all results. It's going to be a list of all the test sessions that I have created in my organization. So at a district level, we're going to have visibility into every test session that has been set up within a school within your district. It's too much to manage all at once. But at a school level, this might be a really good way to see what's going on with all sessions and with all of those students in the test session. Got a list. In this case, I have 3 test sessions. I would simply select Go to Students in Session. And that would be then to the list of all of those students. Show you here is how to move students in between sessions. This is another task that you may to do. So that's one of the things before I talk how to do this, and you can see here that it's really easy. You're just saying, here's the student, and then you have these sessions available, and you simply just tell it which session you want these students to be in. You need to note of the fact, though, that you can't move students from one kind of a session to another kind of a session. And what I mean by that is you can't take a student that's currently in a read aloud session and move them to an audio session. And take a student that is in a transcribe session and move them to a main session. And you can't do that because when we create these form group types, right, and that's what transcribe, audio, read aloud, and main are, those are form types of forms that the student is going to receive. The system knows that moving them from a read aloud to another means that they might not receive the same form. So the system is not going to let you do that. When we talk about moving students between test sessions, know that this works only if you are moving students to the same type of test session. So maybe you have 2 audio test sessions in your school, and you want to move student A to another one of those sessions. That you can do. You have the ability to remove and add students from a session once they've been added. Now, we talked about how you couldn't move a student from a read aloud to an audio session. That's true. But it doesn't mean that there wouldn't sometimes be a need to make that happen, right? Like we had a student in a read aloud test session, but really we want that student to receive the audio form. What you would need to do is first remove the student from the first session. So remove them from the read aloud session, and now become eligible to be pulled into the audio test session. So you're just going to remove the student and then add them back in. Screenshot here, you would select the task, add, remove students in session. You'll have the option to do both, remove and add within the same screen. So you can remove a student by simply removing the check mark next to their name, and I can add a student by starting to type their name. As long as they are eligible for this test session, they're assigned the right test, and line test, and right organization, and they're not in another test session, their name will show up here for me to pull them in. About the resources available, and I've mentioned these a couple of times as we've gone through the training. So this is where you're going to get your seal codes, your listing tickets for students and proctors. This happens to be a read aloud test session, and I know that because the proctor testing ticket is here. Again, proctor testing ticket will provide a login and password to TestNav for the proctor so that they can log in and see the same test the students are in TestNav. If you look at the bottom of the screenshot, you're going to see the testing tickets. It's available for you in multiple views. This is what is going to provide to the student the login information and password. Those testing tickets are student specific, so it's critical when handing these out that they go to the right students, as that will be what ties them to their test. The seals, again, are used in the online test as a way to get the student from the first part of the test to the second part of the test. And it will simply just be a 4-digit code that when the time comes, the administrator will provide to the student. You see a screen of a test session, and you could say monitoring this test session. This particular screenshot has a variety of student statuses, just so that you can see what that looks like. So there's a Zoom status, there's a Zoom upload status, active, edited, or completed and marked complete. At a high level, I can do this either at a test session level, or if I want to, I can click Combine View, which is this top left circle here, and that's going to show me all of the students for any of the test sessions that I have selected. So I can see exactly where my kids are in the testing process. Some may have in the past had need to resume a test. If a student logs out, they're going to be in an exited status, and that's what you see there in red. In order for the student to log back in, the test must first be resumed, and this is done by the test administrator. What you select the student by selecting the check box next to name, and then to resume student test, and you several students that way, or you can go to the drop down on the student specifically, and you can see that you have the option to resume there as well. You won't be able to log in using that authorization ticket until the step is done. And you will see this more for 2016 because of the addition of that second part. I set and start earlier in the training. This is new for DC Science 2016. Wasn't new in 2015 because there was only one part to the test. Some of you may be familiar with this from PARCC 2015. Not needed in PARCC 2016 because of the unit testing that is being done. Each section is its own section that a student logs in and out of. Whereas DC Science, we're working with the original way of things. So the way that PARCC did things last year, and the way we did things last year, we're going to continue to do them that year, which is we just have one test, and in that test we have two parts. If I want a student to take part 2 or part 1, I need to tell the system that that's what I want it to do, so that when the student logs in, they will be in the right place. Set and start / resume, the task is how I'm going to do that. I'll student in question, I'll select the task, set start / resume, which will take me to the second screenshot here, where I can select the section. You'll see where that red arrow is. This drop down. You'll be able to select part 2. And that way, when the student logs in, that's what you'll see. That you may need to complete is marking a student's test complete, if for what reason the student will not submit themselves. And if that is the case, you would simply use the Mark Student Test Complete task. You would select student, enter your reason, and then indicate Mark Complete. This slide will show you the reasons to select from when marking a student complete. Then when marking a student test complete, that the intent is also for that test to not be scored or to be voided. In order to do that, please contact OSSE, and the information to do so is on this slide. All right, I'm going to talk briefly about TestNav and show you a couple of screenshots of some of the new things that your students will encounter in the online testing environment. First are seal codes. So on the right, what you're looking at is what the student is going to see in TestNav. So they're going to complete 1, and then they're going to see this screen. A code that you will be providing them with will be entered into the Enter Seal Code box, and then we'll be able to select Start Section, which will then take them into Part 2 of the test. The dot left gives a visual of really how this test is split out. So 1, which is referred to as Section 1, was 15 questions. The student entered the first seal code, which in this case is the only seal code in the test, and went to Part 2, which is also called Section 2, and will also house 15 questions. That color contrast and answer masking would be available to all students in TestNav. That is true. Remember that this does not come from the PNP. However, we do want you to make an indication there if a student is eligible for these accessibility features, accommodation for other reasons, for documentation purposes. This here is a picture of the upper right-hand corner of TestNav. Where they go is where the student will see the name, select the drop-down. They can change the background and foreground color. This is where they would access the magnifier, do line reader, or enable answer masking. So this is where they're going to make that selection. Again, it's available for any and all students, and they make the decision on whether to turn it on or off. This is where the student will sign out of TestNav Part 1 and Part 2 of testing. The feature that is new in TestNav is the audio form that we've talked about. The audio form will have an audio player that will be available on each item and each passage. I wanted to just give you a quick glimpse as to what this would look like for the student. It's very simple to use. Each will look just like this, and it will provide how much time has elapsed in the clip, how long the clip is. It will allow the option to either play or pause, and also provide a progress bar for a visual as to how far through the clip the student is. There will be volume control for each of the clips. One thing I do want to mention here is that I think for students that I've encountered using this, it's pretty intuitive. They don't typically have questions. It works just like most audio players would with any system. The one, though, that I do want to point out is that when there is an item and a passage, so there's stimulus material or something that belongs with the item, the audio clip for that is separate than the audio clip for the item. So there may at times be two audio players on the screen, one passage or stimulus and one for the item. Legally, it is possible for the student to have both of those going at the same time. The student controls the audio player. So they select play. Nothing auto plays for the student. They have complete control of what plays and when. So just make a note that a student could, if they intended to, click play both of those audio players, and they will play simultaneously. Some important dates. As I mentioned before, registration begins on 4/18. Please remember that on 4/20 or after to go in and check PNP information and registration information that Pearson has entered for those grade 5 and 8 students. Those of you registering for biology, Pearson will not be doing that for you. So you can do that registration on 4/18. For online forms will be available starting April 25th. If you have students that have the paper testing accommodation, don't forget to order those materials. That opens on March 30th. It opens through April 25th. And of course, testing window for the DC Science Administration this year is May 2nd through June 3rd. We do have a variety of supports in place to assist you. We will, as Swea had mentioned, this particular training will be posted for you. However, as always, there is documentation and other training available through the PearsonAccess Next Support page. Customer support line, as we did last year, in the state or district, is there for assistance as well. Here provided just a short list. There's a lot of things out there that can help you, but here are some things that can help you technology-wise and with the PearsonAccess Next system. I referenced the PearsonAccess Next User's Guide early in the training. For those of you that are not as familiar with the system, highly recommend that guide. It's step-by-step. If you use it online, it's real-time, so any updates are immediately reflected. It does provide screenshots, so I think that's a really good resource. Here's just a list of reminders of what kinds of things Pearson customer service can help with. We can help navigating through PearsonAccess, help you to manage your student registration, setting up test sessions, setting up proctor caching, all of kinds of things we can help you here with at Pearson. A list of things that your OSSE or your LEA testing coordinator are happy to help you with, testing schedules, unique accommodations, and test security questions, voiding tests, unsubmitting tests, any policy type questions, all of those kind of things would need to go either to your district or to OSSE. That is the training that we have put together for you today. It's been a quiet group, but we do have some time, and we are happy to answer any questions that you might have. So if you have any questions, just do #6 to your phone. Is there anything in particular that you to revisit? Any questions that may have come up?
I just want to let know about our office hours again. We have this scheduled on the website. So if you do have questions, please feel free to. Yeah. Hi.
I'm Joanne Cornisha Patterson. How are you?
We can hear.
Okay. Well, my question is, I have some autism students that are taking the pencil paper-based assessment. Is it mandatory that these children take the science assessment?
Yes. Let me hear your question one more time. You're saying you have students that
I have students who are fifth grade. They'll be taking the science assessment. However, I have one or two children that are autism, and they're not on the high level of the spectrum, but they're taking the PARCC assessment via pencil paper. And I'm wondering, is it mandatory that they take the science portion of this as well?
So this is Alicia Adams, and I didn't talk offline, but the first one I have is, for these students to be eligible for the alternate assessment?
No. A couple of the kids, they preferred N. I think they should have been. However, they're not according to OSSE. They have to take the test. So because of that, we have set them up with pencil and paper. And so in other words, I need to do the same thing for the science. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But send me an email just so that I can follow up with you. My name is on. Is it on those slides there? Slide. Well, but it's Lanisha Adams at dc.gov.
How are you? Your first name?
It's LNY. LANYSHA.
Just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right, thank you. I'll send you an email.
Thank you for your question. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In the line that has a question.
Hello. Yes, starting from Roosevelt High School. I have a question because I have to upload my biology students into PAN. Once I import one file, if I need to change it, can I import a second time without changing the name, or should I change the name of the file?
Good question. You do not have to change the name of the file.
Can you mute? Excuse me. Just a minute. You've heard. Question. Thank you. Background.
I am. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can. Not. Is that any better? One. Okay. I muted everyone. Hit #6 on your phone. Let me know that you can hear me, and then I can try to address that question.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
I can hear you as well. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay. So the question, just to make it understood, so you're loading your biology students, and you do an upload, and everything's in there, registration, PNP. Now you want to go back in and you want to make some changes, right? Okay. I think the action was, do you need to rename the file? So from a Pearson perspective, name that file whatever you want, and if you want to reload it with the same name, it's not going to hurt anything. You know, I think just from my own experience, I usually try to give it a version number, and that's just more for me. In case I need to go back into that file and look at anything, I'll have that as a reference. But system perspective, it's not going to matter. That answer your question?
That does answer the question.
Great.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Will this link be available on the test coordinator's website?
It's going to be on the background. I didn't hear what you said.
The background is pretty bad, and I think it's just some kind of a feedback that we're getting. I'm not sure why we're getting it.
What about you, okay?
My will the webinar be available on the test coordinator's website?
The webinar will be available on the Science Assessment website, but I'll make a link. So if you're going into PARCC, you can also come into the DC Science site and find the webinar.
Okay. That will be, hello?
I can hear you. It'll be probably in the next 2 days.
Hear me now?
I can.
Okay, so to get to that link, hi, this is Nicole Stroman. To get to the link for the webinar that you just said, it was going in and out. We can do that from the main page where we can also track our ordering, ordered materials and everything.
Well, different than PARCC. When you're ordering, you're not going to get the same type of response than you would for PARCC. I'll send you an email if you do a paper order separately. But to get to this presentation, you can do a couple of things. You can go into the DC Science OSSE website, and you can find it there. I'll also link it from the PARCC site. So if you're under PARCC resources, you can do it there as well. And then the PARCC Science Bulletin that we get each week, I'll make sure that we include it to it in there as well.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I think that's all my time. What was it? It was a PARCC. I had to go home because we were listening as a group on the laptop, and so I misheard. But the arrival dates for ordered materials is April 20th through 22nd. I'm sorry, 27th. And
you were correct the first time. April 20th through the 22nd would be the first date. If you get your orders put by Friday, this Friday the 8th, be delivered between April 20th and 22nd. If you place an order after the 8th, and then May 11th through the 13th.
Okay. And then, because we already placed orders for the PARCC. We did that like on the 11th of March. Then I have to keep tracking that.
Yeah, it would be a separate ordering process.
Oh, all right. So I just want to make sure that okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have a question.
So just to clarify, we have to use an additional, like, to know what our accommodations are from, like, their IPs to create something like we did, like to update the PNP. That's the kind of thing we'll have to do here. That's one thing is that even though it was already in the system, we had to update it kind of mentally, I guess. So biology, we'd still do the same thing, except the accommodations that we're putting in some of the systems won't actually, in terms of what the student is seeing. Am I correct?
Yeah, so, and Suya, please feel free to add anything or, that anything else. But, so biology, you will be required to enter your student registration and PNP information. You are correct when you say that won't matter or it won't be impactful to the actual form or feature that the student receives. That's elsewhere, right, through the test session setup. However, it is required. Is being shared as documentation. So that information is still needed and will be shared with OSSE, just won't drive the forms.
Okay. So to create or to orders in, that has to be done. So that's for the park. What I was input the accommodation, then only then was I able to order certain things for students. Does it matter?
The only thing you're ordering now are the paper tests, and everything that you would need would be online, like scripts and things like that. There are no kits or anything else that you would need to order other than the paper test itself.
Okay.
Is it possible to do a batch upload for session information?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it will work just like it does for PARCC. And that Pearson did that for you for grade 5 and 8 last year. But because of the multiple session types, we have the notes cannot. But that functionality does work.
So that would be through the PNP file.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question. For biology, the names, will they already be in the in pen? I just X them. Is that correct? And then make my corrections and then upload. I don't have to start from scratch, correct?
Not be loading any 2016 data for biology students into PA Next.
Okay. So I have to put in names and everything else. Where will I get the information on exactly what to populate?
Good question. So the PNP layout.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andy. You can answer.
Oh, sorry, I didn't talk over you. No, I was just going to say, the PNP file layout will give you that. It talks about all of the different field requirements and what is needed.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Some of the information is the same. There are a few different fields for science, but the majority of the file layout is very similar to what we used in PARCC. But we don't have a roster of students that are in biology, so that's why we need to do the upload yourself. The question. Anyone else have any more questions?
And the accommodations, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Questions? All right. Suya, Anisha, anything else?
I want to thank everyone for your participation today, and we're excited about Administer Science Assessment again this year. If you have any questions, we'll provide our contact information. Please pay attention to the science and bulletins that come out each week, as well as attending class hours if you'd like any assistance. But thank you, Pearson, for your support today, and We will end it here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Great day. Bye.
Bye.
Oh.